I think it's 4 o'clock and we are ready to get started with our presentation this evening. Good evening, everyone. Anna Perrell, principal here at Clark-Wilkins. Just wanted to thank everybody for being here tonight. I wanted to introduce everybody that is on the panel with me tonight that will be presenting. Kathleen Murphy, assistant principal for curriculum instruction and assessment. Kristen Morgenstern, assistant principal for student services. Karen Rimol is on with us tonight. She's in charge of preschool, special programs, and the assistant director of special ed. Meg Beauchamp is on with us tonight. She's the director of student services. Deanna Cordts is a nurse here at Clark-Wilkins, and Linda Brennick is our new nurse with us at Clark-Wilkins. I just wanted to share that tonight's plan is an entire school effort that we have been working on for many weeks. We appreciate everybody's effort and feedback and comments, and I think you'll see even up to last night taking feedback in and making modifications and some changes based on staff, student, and parent needs. We ask you if you have any questions during the presentation that you do not use the chat feature, but put your questions in the Q&A section. Hopefully from our logistics document that we sent out to you, that it was able to give you a lot of information and videos and materials and screencasts for you to see, to have a good idea of some of the materials that we're going to present, but certainly please use that information, that toolbar down low. So with the first slide, I think with all of this, what we always want to make sure that we start with here at Clark-Wilkins is just your kids at the forefront of everything that we do, everything that we're thinking of, how much we miss them, how much we miss you, and everything that we're doing for this plan, whether it is in person or remote, takes in consideration just that your child is at the core of everything that we're thinking of. And with those three goals is safety, health, and support of your student and our staff. Adam has said from the beginning with our task force, we're ensuring that all students make 1 year of academic growth, and just that these plans really have to be flexible and creative. And we are going to and have put all three of these goals and your child at the forefront of every single decision that we have made. Next up, the culture and culture of safety and learning. With your assistance and all of the staff here, we are going to be creating a culture that is going to be normalizing mask wearing, physical distancing, hand washing, and other safety protocols. We're a school, so we are all about supporting and educating kids. This is all new for all of us. So we are going to help the students along the way with these new protocols, with this new normal of how we are doing in-person school. So it's new for all of us, and we will help your children along the way with these new protocols. So next up, common planning is vital to the success of our plan. It is the success of our pods. We have 3 teachers per pod. There's up to 10 teachers per grade level. We need the opportunity for teachers to be able to talk about students, talk about needs. And that was really the impetus for us to take a look at making the change in the school hour to start at 9:15, and know that the additional time off from mask was certainly a bonus. So from last night, we just want to say that we heard your concerns, and we have been working all day with all parties in order to come up with an option for parents. And that option is to be able to, if needed for parents, to extend the day in the morning where there could be drop off for a parent between 8 and 9:15. So back to the safety protocols and our whole premise around pods and keeping students within their pods. A student, if they came early, would go directly to their homeroom, to their pod, and they would be provided support from a support staff with an activity of reading or another quiet activity and game. So again, this will be an opportunity for those parents that are looking for an early drop off. And 8 o'clock is 10 minutes prior to what could have happened last year. Please know that we are still working to make sure that there is an option for parents earlier. We will be reaching out and collaborating with New Morning. There's still an option for parents with Hampshire Hills and Boys and Girls Club. So we will keep you informed as we get more information about those. So arrival and dismissal, we talked about that a little bit last night with our need for distancing and not congregating. I think the videos showed drop off in the morning at both Clark and Wilkins. We will have staff members outside. Once the staff members are ready for you at the official 9:15 drop off, it should be pretty quick. We're asking parents to help the students out of the car. Certainly there'll be staff members to help students get to the correct doors to enter. Yes, I know it is might be an inconvenience for some of the parents if they have to drop off at Wilkins in front and at Jones Road. At this point in time, and especially during the first section, not knowing what our numbers are going to look like, this is where we are right now. If we see that there's an opportunity in a future segment in order to do the arrival differently, certainly we will be flexible with that. But right now, just the need for safety and making sure we're not congregating, we're starting with that plan. Dismissal, as you saw in our videos, we will have 3 waves. We'll send information out once we know what parents are coming. A 3:05, a 3:15, and a 3:25. We're not going to make it difficult, probably just simple colors, red, yellow, and green. That would be your dismissal wave for the first segment. And then if your dismissal change, we would also make a change for you. At Clark, we did make the switch. Buses will be dropping off at Davis Lane, and parent drop off and pickup will happen at the front of the school. And certainly if there's extra information or if a parent wants to talk or walk through anything, certainly reach out to any of us here at the school. Next up is lunch and recess. Lunch and recess will take place with your pod. All students will be eating lunch in their classroom. I know we've said this that on many separate occasions that we will have staff members help deliver the food to the students in their classrooms. Certainly we will have kids be part of the cleanup and clearing process. We will have hand washing afterwards. We do have hand sanitizers as you come into all entrances and exits from lunch and recess. The specific lunch times will be determined by the pods, which again allows for that flexibility, which we feel is definitely advantageous. Recess, the teachers in the pod will be able to sign up for recess times. We certainly have a vast outdoor play area that we are able to distance students. I know that there were questions early on. We will not have mask wearing at recess. We will have the pods spread out and again, reinforcing with the students the distancing, but while we're outside at recess, there'll be no mask being worn. And we'll talk later about mask breaks. So with that, I am turning it over to Deanna.
Hi, everybody. So the nurse information that we put together, we're going to do things a little different in the health office. And Linda and I have talked about this, and the nurses in the whole district will be doing the same thing as well. If a teacher has a student that like to be seen by a nurse, we're asking that they call the nurse's office, and one of us will come to the classrooms. We're trying to avoid extra traffic in the hallways, which would lead to extra exposures that might be unnecessary. So we'll make an assessment in the classroom, and if we feel that the child needs to come to the nurse's office, then that's what we'll do. If they need to be dismissed, then that's what we'll do as well. We'll also be bringing their daily scheduled medications to the classroom. We've had a few students that have had to take medication during the day, so we'll bring that to them rather than having them come to the nurse's office. We are requesting assistance from parents in that if your student requires a medication in the morning, or if there's a way of not having to have medication at school, that's the ideal. Please make sure they take their medication in the morning. We want to try to avoid having to give morning medications in the health office. Next slide, please. Some of our protocols are going to be, or screening, we're requesting parents to do at home before they send the child to school. And this is because a lot of them take the bus or dropped off. If we tried to do this when the kids came to school, we feel that it would be a problem with social distancing. It would be a backup of people. So we're asking for temperatures to be checked. If they are greater than 100, don't send your child to school. If they're complaining of any of the following symptoms: chills, headache, gastrointestinal symptoms like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, or stomach ache, upper respiratory symptoms, cough, sore throat, runny nose, shortness of breath, fatigue, body aches, loss of taste or smell, a known exposure to someone that's positive with COVID-19, or recent travel outside of the New England states. I'll post in the question and answers later, or the chat room, to the link to travel guidance for you, as you can plan that your trips around that this year. These screening questions come from the CDC and the New Hampshire Health Department. We're having some kind of a program, a computer program, that you could input this information in the morning. And like I said, if your child has any of these symptoms, then they must remain home. It just is safer for that way. Next slide, please. The staff will also be required to do the same screening. They'll probably do it right at school though, and temperature checks at schools on the way in. And the same goes for them. If there's any of the symptoms, or if a temperature over 100.0, they are not to come into the building as well. The reason for us reporting or sending kids home a little easier than maybe we would have in the past is because children tend to have mild symptoms from if they're infected with COVID, and we want to make sure that we do the best we can to not have COVID in the school. So the symptoms that we're looking for in that screening list, they are common for some other things. And what we're going by is if this is a new symptom for them. For example, if a child has postnasal drip or fall allergies, things like that, it would be helpful if you could input that information when you do your enrollment process under the medical area. So we know ahead of time, these are regular conditions. And we're saying if anything's different than their usual, that's when you need to be contacting your doctor. Next slide, please. So once a child is dismissed, this is if we sent them home with symptoms, we're asking you to call your primary care doctor, and they need to be tested for COVID-19. They will be admitted back to school after 10 days at home, or if they have a test and it's negative, they can come back with the negative results. If your choice is to not test your child, they'll need to be quarantined for 10 days at home. That's a state regulation. So it's called the 10-to-1 rule. So it's 10 days total, with the last 1 day, 24 hours, being without symptoms of nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, vomiting, diarrhea, or fever. We may be advised to dismiss siblings from the same family. We will contact the state of New Hampshire Public Health Department if we have questions, and we will receive our guidance from them. If someone is positive, we will be notified. We're told by the state that we'll be notified, probably the nurse's office, and they're going to help us with contact tracing, but their responsibility is contact tracing, not ours. So you might be a day or two for the test. They're getting better with getting results back from the tests, and they're really working on that. As soon as we find out, we would act upon that as with directions from the Department of Health and Human Services. We're also asking in the registration packet, when you go online, there'll be something to sign, each parent to sign to show that they're acknowledging what we're requesting in all of these procedures. Did you want to add anything, Linda? Or I think that was the last slide for us. No? Good. Okay.
Anna, do you want to talk a little bit about the cleaning protocols?
Yes. So we met with our head custodian and with the director of maintenance today, just to get clear protocols to be able to share with you tonight. You can see that the deep cleaning and disinfecting will be at the end of every day. Preschool, there's an AM and PM, so that there will be that same deep disinfecting. High touch point areas will be cleaned and disinfected multiple times during the day. That includes bathroom areas. After lunch, as we talked about before, students will wipe down those surfaces. And you know, part of our protocols will be frequent hand washing and sanitizing. We have asked for the portable sinks. We have multiple classrooms that do not have classroom sinks, so we are hoping to get portable sinks in every single classroom. So we also have hand washing in the classroom outside of just the hand sanitizers.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to speak a little bit to our pod structure. Pod is kind of our new word for everyone this year when we're thinking about how we can best utilize our staff to provide the most meaningful learning environment for our students here at Clark-Wilkins. So all students will be assigned to a homeroom, and that homeroom will have between 10 and 15 students in it based on the number of students who elect in-person instruction. That homeroom teacher will be their anchoring adult, so that'll be the main point of contact for those students that are in that homeroom. That homeroom will also have a full-size classroom space, so all of our homeroom teachers will each have a full-size classroom space, but they'll be part of a 3-person or really 4-person teaching pod with 3 certified teachers, one of those teachers having an additional certification in either special education or as a reading specialist, and a paraprofessional working together to support all of those students. Students will receive all of their intervention and special education academic services within this pod. This will prevent students who may have traditionally left a classroom environment and gone to another location within the building from needing to transition back and forth outside of their classroom environment, allowing the learning to occur within their current classroom space. And will also allow for a little bit of flexibility with students going out to recess with a little bit larger of a group of peers when we have more space for kids to physically distance themselves. So students will not mix with other students outside of their pod during the school day. So during the school day, they will be with the students within their pod, mostly within their homeroom, and I'll explain a little bit more as you can see in a schedule that will be highlighted exactly what that will look like in just a few minutes, but I'll show the next slide, which shows the structure of the pods that we have proposed based on our projections at this given moment. Now, of course, we are eagerly awaiting the projections that we'll have with numbers of students who are electing in-person and remote, and these pods could certainly shift if needed, but our plan would be for each of these pods to be comprised of those 3 teachers, one with the special education certification and also a classroom paraprofessional. You can see in kindergarten, we're projecting 3 of those pods, in first grade, 2 of those pods, second grade, 3, third 2, and fourth grade has 3 of those pods at this current time. So if we look at the next slide, you can see how we're structuring the building to support students in accessing their instruction within the pod and not moving around the building in too much of a fashion. So the pods are close to each other physically, many of which have interior classroom doors where kids will not need to go into the hallway to transition, and some of which even have exterior doors, which we can safely have students use those outdoor entrances to gain access to the space. Like I said, we'll talk more when we get to that schedule. There's not a ton of movement within the pods, but there is the ability for a student to receive the instruction that they need within this pod model, which we're pretty excited about, to be able to, have these teacher teams work really deeply together to provide what those students need that are assigned to their pod in all content areas. Students will not be in the hallways unless there is a need to use a restroom space. Deanna shared earlier, the nurses will be going to the students. There really will not be much movement. If you are familiar with Clark, and I know we have many new K families who are excited to learn about Clark, and we will address that a little bit later as to how we're supporting you and learning more about our environment if you're new to us. But if you are aware of what it's looked like, typically kids have had all of their hooks outside of the classroom doors and hung up coats and backpacks outside in the hallway. Well, that kind of promotes some congregation in the hallway, and we're looking to minimize that. So our pods have been designed where all students at Clark can actually use those exterior entrances to their classroom spaces to move into another space if they need to for instruction, and they will not need to be in the hallway. Of course, unless they're using the restroom, which we will have some bathroom protocols in place limiting specific bathrooms to specific groups of pods, so we're not having all students using the same bathroom at Wilkins, and also just helping to not have all students from one class go at the same time at Clark, and certainly just mitigating that risk with that shared space. The next slide talks a little bit about class placement, and I'm going to Anna talk some more on that, in particular in regards to the in-person versus remote learning environment. We've been getting some questions about that from parents.
Sure. So two things on this. So for placement, so for each segment, you're going to be asked whether you want to be in person or remote. If you are in person, you will be given a homeroom teacher and a pod. If you are remote, you will then be given a remote teacher. So you won't be given both. So if you would switch in between segments and move from a remote into a classroom, then at that point in time, you would be assigned a homeroom teacher. And the reason we can't do that in advance is because 2 weeks before every single segment, we're going to ask every parent what they're looking to do. So those placements are going to be based on numbers. So when I say that, I don't want any misunderstanding. So let's say that you're in Mrs. Boothroyd's class. You are in their first segment and you don't change, you're staying in her segment. But if you were remote and you're going into first grade, then we have to see what the numbers are in the rest of the homeroom classes. So hopefully that makes sense with that. And then those are based each time on a segment. So a little bit about our process. So we're hoping that with the information session tonight, you're going to get enough information that you're making your decision. We will have all of that information by Friday. And based on that information, that's when we're going to start making class lists. So we already reached out to all parents to say about moving classes together. Our hope is certainly still to keep groups of students together from their 2019-2020 class up until to the next class. Again, based on the numbers, we don't know if that will be a whole class, but certainly we will be moving group of students together. Class placements will not be shared until that Friday before school starts. And I think you can appreciate that with the ever-changing information and numbers. And if people make switches, we are going to have that information out on the 28th.
So I want to go through a sample daily schedule for in-person instruction and just talk what it might look like for students in that pod model. So like Anna said at the very beginning of this, the core of our work here at Clark-Wilkins is focused on the student, and that for us is a lot of our philosophies around social emotional learning and the importance of morning meeting, building community, establishing for students that feeling of belonging, significance, and fun here at school. We know this is going to be an especially important year to emphasize this, as we know that kids have experienced that disrupted learning, things have looked different, and we want to make sure we're establishing that with kids at the very beginning. So all of our schedules will start with that morning meeting approach where students will be able to connect with their peers and their teachers and set the stage for their learning. And you'll see later, this exists also within our remote learning environment too. Students would engage in literacy instruction in all of the classrooms, and then there would be an opportunity for small group reading. Now, you know, all of our classroom teachers have always done small group reading instruction, and they provided that targeted instruction for maybe the kids in their class, and their class sizes could have been a bit larger, and they would have seen groups on a regular basis. But in this model, what we're able to do is say, during that small group reading time, when we have 3 highly qualified teachers, we can really divide students up a little differently to provide some more targeted instruction. So that teacher with the special education certification would be providing those IEP services for the students who need it. But a teacher, you know, one of our classroom teachers could be providing a tier 2 intervention service for a student, meaning, you know, maybe that group of students just needed a little boost in phonemic awareness, and that teacher has that skill set and is able to meet the needs of those students. Additionally, this really kind of excites us in the fact that we have the ability to provide some opportunity for enrichment and extension. For those students who need to be challenged and pushed, we would have the chance to build in some of those group opportunities here. So throughout the day, you can see that that group is having recess and lunch, when we would follow all of our safety protocols for physical distancing within those environments, for students to maintain cleanliness with the lunch and the hand washing and cleaning off their table spaces, opportunity for math lessons and small group math. And you'll see here that our specials block is really brief, and that is intentional in nature. I'll talk further about that on our next slide in regards to specials, but we're hoping to build that opportunity as a bridge between our remote learners and our in-person instruction students as well. So this is a sample of what a daily schedule may look like for a student who elects that in-person model for instruction. Thank you. So thinking about that special environment, we are going to have 5 specials here at Clark-Wilkins for all students at Clark and at Wilkins. So they'll receive those specials in a remote format. So that looks like art, music, library, PE, and guidance. So what exactly does that remote instruction look like? And that means we're looking for it to be a blend of synchronous and asynchronous. So synchronous meaning happening at the same time in a live format, and asynchronous meaning that maybe there's a pre-recorded lesson that the specialist introduces, and then the students are able to watch and engage in. Some of the feedback that we received from our teachers and from our parents is that those short bursts of instruction were really meaningful for our young learners. So it's our goal that our specialists are providing some short mini lessons in their content areas. They're able to zoom in to the in-person class, and those remote learners are able to zoom in at the same time. So there's a bridge there for a first grader who's at home and a first grader who's in person too, to participate in that shared music class. And then later, outside of the school hours, the families could elect to continue the learning in that content areas if they so chose to, using Google Classroom as our main platform to maybe access additional activities or materials. We are working really hard. You know, Ms. Anderson has been in thinking about her art supplies here at Wilkins and how we can divide them up to make sure that students have what they need to continue working on a project in an individual format, and how we can provide some of those tools to our remote learners also for pickup, so they have them at their disposal as well. That will be some of the work that those specialists engage on in those deep professional development days as they look to realign their instruction to meet the needs of this new model.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about special education supports and services in this model. As Kathleen mentioned, on that 3-person pod teaching team, one of those teachers is either a general education teacher with a dual special ed certification, or a reading specialist, or a special educator. All of those, as outlined in the IEPs, the specially designed instruction services, either individually or in small groups, will be delivered within that pod classroom by the special educator in consultation with a special education case manager who will likely be working remotely. They will have regular weekly meetings to kind of talk about what those services should look like, reviewing goals and objectives. In terms of the related services, our students who qualify for related services like speech therapy, occupational therapy, counseling, these may occur either remote or in person. In-person small groups would be comprised of students that would have similar needs and come from the same pod, so that we're reducing that exposure. Cleaning protocols will occur between students as they access the related services spaces within the building. Students who have special education supports and services who opt for remote would receive their direct instruction and related services remotely, as outlined in their IEPs. Our meetings will continue to occur via Zoom to really reduce the amount of people in the building. They've proven to be pretty effective throughout this time that we were in remote learning in the spring. And within that first month of school, IEP teams will be holding meetings to address any concerns regarding where students are at and any additional supports and services that we may need to look at putting in place for students. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Karen Rimol to talk about specialized programs in preschool.
Good evening. So I'll be working with the students that have, with the IEP teams for the students in our specialized program. So I'd like to just talk a little bit about that. For those students that have those IEP supports associated with our specialized programs at Wilkins, specifically the STARS program and the My Time program, as well as some of the newer specialized programs at Clark. The IEP teams will be meeting to individually discuss and design how that access to those supports will take place, as well as the general education curriculum, how the students will access those. So those will really be individually designed programs that meet the students' needs, again, developed by those IEP teams. As Anna had said initially, our approach for all children is to address the educational needs, the social emotional needs, and include the supports and services of the IEP, certainly with the context of being able to mitigate risk and exposure for students and staff. So those will be the focus of our efforts there. At these IEP team meetings, we will also talk about how that access to the special education supports would be delivered should a parent choose the option of remote learning. And preschool. So our preschool is a tuition-based program that serves our 3- and 4-year-old children who register for the program. And in past years, we've been able to offer programs for both 3- and 4-year-old children. This year, in order to respond to the overall needs of the Clark-Wilkins community, we did have to limit our program capacity, which was disappointing to us very much. So this year, we're anticipating that the preschool Clark will take place for our tuition-registered 4-year-old children. And we will not be able to offer a program for our 3-year-old students this year. Preschool will not hold a remote option.
I think Karen was having some trouble with some screen freezing. So I think she was just talking about the fact that preschool will not have a remote option. Is that correct?
Preschool will not have a remote option. I'm sorry, Karen kind of froze on us there. Preschool will not have a remote option. We are, we trialed it. It was not successful. So for the typical children who would be attending our pre-K. We're not offering a remote option at this time. It's always our hope that the pandemic will lighten up on us, or we'll get a vaccine and we'll be able to open our pre-K and run it to its capacity. But right now, that's just not an option.
So Kristen,
Okay, move to
I
the
would
next.
say let's,
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about remote learning and what does that environment look like for our remote learners. And I do hope that parents were able to check out our Clark-Wilkins specific reopening logistics document. And really specifically inside of that, the video that was made that talks through the remote learning schedules, because I think it provided a lot of insight into what a remote learner's day will look like. We worked with teachers and we worked with parents and collected feedback on remote learning in the spring, and really want to be intentional in providing a remote learning environment that is robust and gives students what they need, but also meets the needs of our young learners in a developmentally appropriate way, with some opportunities for movement breaks and social interactions with their peers. And we are committed to providing professional development for our teachers in creating those engaging remote learning environments that help to build class community in a different kind of format than they may have been used to in the past. So, in that remote learning environment, we are having at least one remote learning teacher per grade level. And I know this has been there's been a lot of conversation about remote learning kindergarten. If you watched last night, remote learning kindergarten is an option for families who elect that choice. And we will, establish a classroom environment that is needed based on the number of students who elect remote learning, regardless of their grade level. At this point, we're anticipating one teacher per grade, but that number could change. If we get a lot of remote learners in a particular grade level, we may need to assign another section of remote learning for that grade level. The class sizes will be similar to what our traditional class sizes have looked like, of between 20 and 24 students. So that remote learning teacher will be responsible for all of that content instruction in that classroom environment. They'll also meet with small groups and have individual sessions with students as needed. Of course, students who have special education services, those services will happen in the remote learning environment, as will all of our IEP meetings and student progress meetings as needed. Like I mentioned with the specials, the opportunity for specials to be conducted remotely gives Clark-Wilkins students a chance to build a bridge between their in-person peers and those remote learning peers. So they'll have that same block of time built into their schedule. So the next slide shows a sample of a primary level remote learning environment. And this is very much a sample schedule. We're trying to think about what could this day look like for a parent to kind of have on their mind as we're moving forward with some of these decisions you need to make as a family. Obviously, as we mentioned, that commitment to social emotional learning, the belonging, significance, and fun that aligns with our philosophy around responsive classroom. Even in the remote learning environment, we are going to begin with that morning meeting chance for kids to connect, with each other, have that check-in with their teachers, and then we're going to move into instruction. And at that K2 level, you're looking at phonemic awareness and foundations, which is our reading foundational program, teaching kids how to read and spending time focusing on that. Building in opportunities for independent reading, opportunities for teacher-directed read-alouds and mini lessons, small group and work time, having that lunch and outdoor time, and specials that would be conducted live with their peers in person, and additional time for more small groups. We found that to be most meaningful with our students, that a skill may have been introduced synchronously or asynchronously by the classroom teacher, and then that teacher was able to follow back up with the students in a small group or individual capacity to ensure that the learning was happening for that student, or something may need to be changed to meet their needs. We also broke apart the color schedule, so you can see the blue time is that dedicated synchronous or asynchronous teacher-directed instruction, and that pink time is time that it's going to be scheduled by the teachers, but it won't mean that every student is live on Zoom all of that day. Also, like I mentioned, this is a draft schedule. There is going to be opportunities for social snacks. There's going to be opportunities for breaks in between, you know, one lesson to another. Teachers are going to be able to say, you know what, it looks like the student needs a little bit of a break from this activity, and we're going to come back to it, just as if they would in our classroom environment when things need to change as you respond to the needs of the learners in front of you. We will be doing the same thing in our remote environment. If you look at the next schedule, it shows a sample third grade, which looks very similar, outside of the fact that in third grade, we aren't necessarily providing direct instruction in phonemic awareness. If a student has that need, it would be addressed in the small group capacity. And you would see continued opportunities for read alouds and teacher directed mini lessons, math lessons, and small group time. On Wednesdays, you know, it is not a flex day. There will be, you know, small group and individual check-in times, but it's definitely a lighter day where a student could perhaps catch up on some assignments that they may have been working on in previous learning times. And we heard that from our parents too, that was really something that they felt like was beneficial to their students. There would still be a structure to it with morning meeting for all kids, but then in that day, small group and individual time connected there. You'll see on the fourth grade schedule, again, very similar. What you might notice is down on the bottom, a little more focused time for science that is outside of just that weekly activity that the teacher may introduce at the other grade levels. The rigor of instruction in science and math and the strong correlation between those standards, you know, allows us to say to that fourth grade level, you know, we're going to dedicate a little bit more time in the remote environment for that content area for those students. So of course, science instruction will happen for all students, K-4, but in fourth grade, it's just a little bit more ramped up in that approach. So I think that this gives a general overview of what the remote learning environment looks like, but I strongly encourage you to check out that video explaining it in a little more detail. One of the things that is really important to us, and like Anna said at the very beginning, as we looked at our schedule here at Clark-Wilkins, is the importance of remote learners and in-person students following the same scope and sequence and curriculum if we are going to truly be able to be flexible and nimble in moving students in and out of environments seamlessly. In order to do that, our teachers need time to work together on their curriculum and be able to follow that same scope and sequence. So a learner in the remote environment is receiving the same instruction as a learner in the in-person environment. So if there's a change there within the environments, or we just know that all of our kids need that essential level of knowledge to continue making progress towards the standards. A big question that's come up has been, you know, we're making those bold statements of we want kids to make a year of academic growth. Well, how are you going to measure that? And we will continue to use NEWA, which is our district level benchmark assessment that students will take throughout the year. We are working on the frequency of those as an SAU-wide team, but that provides some really powerful information about a learner's profile and their strengths and their areas of need. And students in the remote environment and the in-person environment will take that assessment. We also know that with all assessments, it is just one indicator of a student's level of progress that we will take into consideration that child as a whole picture learner and include the formative and summative assessments that will be developed and used amongst the teaching teams. So those could look like phonemic awareness screenings, you know, done at the kindergarten and first grade level. Those could look like exit tickets after certain math lessons, or a performance assessment using an exemplar in math with a high quality word problem that all students are trying to tackle and figure out. And then the teacher takes that information and develops groups and intervention plans as needed within their classroom. So those will be conducted in the in-person and in the remote learning environment. I noticed in the chat there were a couple of questions about kindergarten and assessments, and I would love the opportunity to talk a little bit about them here if that is okay with the rest of the panelists. Okay, so in the past you may have been, and actually prior to us, you know, being a little disrupted this past spring, we were seeking out sign-up dates for our kindergarten screening. And at that time, we would have used that opportunity to meet our new kindergarten students, and then we would have used that information to help us design classrooms. Of course, we weren't able to have that occur, and we are not anticipating that that same type of screening will occur just due to our safety policies and protocols at this time. However, our parents have done a phenomenal job, our incoming K parents, of providing us with feedback, really detailed feedback in that Google survey that was sent out earlier this summer. And if you are a new parent and you just registered, we'll make sure that we send that survey out to you as well, because that information will be helpful and valuable to us as we plan our classrooms. Our teachers will get to know your students as they get started as learners. Our pod structure allows for the interventions and support services to occur within that environment for all kindergarten students, and we are ready to meet them where they are at when they join us in this community. Also, kindergarten, you may have noticed that that first day of school is for 1st through 4th graders. Kindergarten students will start the 2nd day of school, which I believe is the 3rd. And at that point, on the 2nd, there'll be some opportunity for what would have been our in-person orientation. We're anticipating that our teachers will be able to provide some type of Zoom orientations to our parents to ask some questions and provide an overview of kindergarten to those families. In the past, we have done kindergarten information nights. We are going to look to make sure that kindergarten specific information is shared out to families prior to the start of the school year. And we will be working with our kindergarten teachers on developing a plan for that first day to provide all those families with the information that they so need to start the school year as a kindergarten student in person.
That was great, Kathleen. There's maybe just 1 or 2 more there after I talk on the last slide that
Sure.
maybe we can answer out loud. So with the last slide, outdoor learning spaces. Well, we're very excited. Tomorrow, we're actually doing a design build of the outdoor classroom at Clark. I hear it's only going to be 93 or 94 tomorrow. So if anybody has the need to help build, come on over. The PTA and the district were also looking for the purchase of 2 outdoor tents. One for 1st and 2nd grade, one for 3rd and 4th. Certainly I had offers of some extra of the smaller tents. Those are great to be used for mask breaks outside. We have 8 or 9 picnic tables in the wooded area. I mean, we have a beautiful outdoor space at both of the schools that we can certainly leverage during this time for not only the breaks, but for outdoor education. So I think one of our school board members would tell you anything that can happen inside the classroom can happen outside of the classroom. So we are certainly going to leverage those outdoor education opportunities. I've been active in the Q&A. So there are a few things that are coming up. So I just think maybe if I answer them and maybe bring some clarity to them. So again, if you start remote, you're going to be assigned a remote teacher, and that will be your anchoring adult. If you move, let's say, the 2nd segment into in-person, you will then be assigned a classroom teacher. If you kept doing that or did it multiple times, we couldn't assure that your student would go back to the same teacher. We certainly would try, because that makes sense, and they've started to build that relationship. What I had mentioned earlier is every 2 weeks prior to the opening of a segment, we are getting brand new data. Maybe it's consistent, maybe there isn't huge ebbs and flows, but all we can say is we're going to do what makes sense. So building the anchoring adult, building a relationship with a teacher. But if you come back and that teacher has 12 kids and another classroom has less, then those are the things that we have to weigh out. Certainly we would try to put your student back on the same pod. I'm just saying we're just playing with a lot of unknowns with numbers, and certainly we're going to do what makes sense and what's best for the students. Kindergarten's first day is the 3rd, and then on September 2nd, kindergarten teachers will be reaching out to parents to have those Zoom connections with you. There were some questions in the chat that we just have to be honest. There are some things that you asked that we still need to think about. One good question is if we're just going to need to pick up on a certain day, what wave are we? What wave will we be? So those are things, just to be honest, that we'll figure out logistically. Some parents with especially kindergarten and first grade, I mean, we hear you trying to find opportunities to build that transition, to lessen the anxiety. So I think what we'll try to do is we'll try to find ways to make that happen. But I'm almost thinking too, maybe a way is for us to do some videos and take you through Clark. Maybe have the opportunity to introduce the classroom teachers, to kind of walk you through the building and see the teachers. The same thing. The kindergartners coming to first grade. It's the same thing. Clark-Wilkins is going to be new. So what can we do to maybe it's Hootie walking with me and we're able to present the school in a way that is inviting and friendly, and is it scary where you're going to be in the building. Another question was about opportunities for remote students to have social distancing with their teachers. I mean, things that we can think about and work with the teachers. Social emotional learning, that relationship, that connection, wanting your kids to feel safe and comfortable and not nervous. I mean, those are other big, huge safety pieces that are very important to us. So those are things that we will continue to work on after this piece. This was about logistics and safety, and for you to feel comfortable with our instruction and what plans that we have. But there are things that in the next few weeks that we are going to obviously strengthen and deepen to give everybody more comfort. So I would say keep an eye out for more videos. If there's more questions that weren't asked on the Q&A or that come up after, you can please send to any of us. And I think we did a pretty good job on the Q&A.
Yeah, I'm looking it over right now. I'm noticing a question at the top from a parent about remote learning if and when everyone goes remote, and just about recorded lessons. I love to talk a little bit about that. That was a conversation we had with some teachers as well, and hearing from parents that was really helpful for families who may need to go back and review lessons also. So teachers will be working on that model of a blend of synchronous and asynchronous instruction. And that asynchronous instruction is leveraging pre-recorded lessons or high quality resource videos that a child would be able to access outside of those traditional times of the day. So we would have those opportunities for students to view those outside of the day, or for parents to view them at a time that works best for them to help support their student at home.
There were several questions about IT and computers and devices. We're working with the tech director for the computers and distribution. Also on the survey that is coming out, there's questions about not only remote and in-person, about buses, about computer needs at home. So we're gathering all that information so that we are ready for the remote learners. Did we mention already that remote and in person will have packets for materials to go out for specials? And all those materials that are needed. So
yeah, we are working with our teachers to have students use more individualized materials this year. Obviously, we don't want to use as many communal supplies, and we want to minimize the paper and pencil, the paper passing around of materials too within the classroom environment. So we're going to make sure that our remote learners and our in-person learners have the same materials needed for literacy lessons, math lessons, and we'll arrange for pickups as we get closer to the start of the school year. Going along with that, there were a couple of questions in the Q&A. One was about access to library materials. Our librarians are working really hard to be creative on how we can have students access library materials, and they are dying for kids to be able to use those library books, as we are too, but we are also going to beef up some classroom libraries, because we feel like those are a little more manageable for students, to make sure that they have access to those high quality texts within their classroom environment, that they're always reading. We know that kids learn to read by reading, and they learn to write by writing, and those are some of the principles to it. There's obviously more to it, and our skilled teachers understand that too, but we want to make sure we have those materials in the classroom for them to access. We also, I noticed a question about kindergarten and some of those play-based learning activities, which is a huge component of our program, and we are not saying it will not happen this year. We are going to work with our teachers to make sure that materials are easily cleaned, they can be used by the students within the pod. So that's our intention, is that the sharing of supplies only happens in those, you know, moments of we're all in the kitchen center, or maybe I use the easel and somebody else is going to use the easel, and we're going to do our best to clean those, but it's going to be really difficult to clean them after an individual use. So those would be the times that some of those materials may be shared. There could still be some cooperative learning in that environment, and then those materials would be left out each night for our daily cleaning and sanitization by our custodial staff. Noticing a couple of questions about school supply lists. Our teachers are working on developing common supply lists with, you know, similarities amongst the grade level, and it's our goal to have those out by the end of August, around class placement time. I know that's a quick turnaround. We might try to get those out a little bit earlier. We'll bring that question to our teacher team, that, you know, to see if there's possibility for that to occur. I'm noticing another question
Deanna,
about,
maybe the first one.
yeah, Deanna, do you want to answer the outdoor classrooms and playing together and social distancing?
I can try. So the outdoor classrooms, from what I understand, they will be, if they can't social distance in those areas, they will be wearing masks. If they can social distance, they may use it as a mask break. And right now, I don't believe masks are being required at recess time. The playground will be in different sections. So one pod will be in one section at a time. So those children would be together in their classroom normally, will be together on the playground as well. So that's another form of mask break that we were doing.
And then there's also one more, the first one, sent home, the needs to stay home symptoms.
Oh, didn't I answer that already?
If trying to make sure that we
that's right.
everything.
Which is the question?
Okay,
if you answer the questionnaire, this has been up there several times. If you answer the questionnaire for your child in the morning and say yes to those symptoms, and you're not sending them to school, we're asking you to call your doctor and say, okay, my child has these symptoms. I've been told they need to have a COVID test. And that would start the 10-day, you know, stay at home unless we get a negative COVID test, unfortunately. Like I said, the state's telling us this is what we've got to do for guidelines.
So there's several on supplies to it. We are working with, Kathleen's been making some phone calls, working with classroom teachers, PTA, to have personal storage units for supplies. So more information coming out with that, but there's a pretty cool idea for 5-gallon buckets that you can make cushions on. The kids can keep all the materials in there and actually use them as portable seats to go outside to the outdoor classroom. So just some other things that we're working on for that.
I wonder if we just want to go down and try to answer some of these questions. We have, you know, gone through our presentation. We really encourage you to check out our detailed plan and those videos. We are working with creating more of those. I think the questions we're getting about the orientation, these are things we're thinking about now. How can we orient our new families, whether it's new to a building at a grade level with our K and 1 students, making that transition, or pre-K K students joining our communities, and also new to Amherst students entering our grade levels, you know, in first, second through 4th grade too. So just being creative as to how we can safely do that. I think we'll be sending out some more video updates for families. And, you know, Anna, do we want to just go question by question?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. So a previous Q&A question about shutting down and going full remote until
Right.
end of November. So that would be a question for the full SAU staff. And I think at this point, you know, we would be looking to our SAU plan, and the decision if we needed to change colors would be made by the superintendent and that team.
So the next one, how do I sign up my kindergarten daughter to drop off at school in the AM and pick up? We do have a electronic school called PUP, but these are some of the things that we just have to work out what it's going to look like, and if it's a color or process and protocol for if people are changing. I know what would be great is if people had the same drop off and pick up for an entire segment, but we will work on if there are individual changes, what we need you to do, and we'll get that information back out to you.
Great. So a statement about kindergarten families needing program information. I do hope we were able to provide additional information tonight on kindergarten and that environment, but certainly if there are other questions you have as a kindergarten parent, I would encourage you to reach out to any one of us and we'll do our best to answer them. But I would also foresee us providing some additional videos on Clark School for those new students into that environment as well. The sharing of the supplies, we did talk a little bit about that, how we aren't going to remove play-based learning environments, that those will still exist, but really only students within that pod would have the opportunity to share those supplies with each other, as they're the only ones going out to recess together, and they're the only ones that you know, are spread out across that pod throughout the day.
It keeps moving. How will NWEA be administered to remote learners? So it will happen at the exact same time as in school. There'll be the remote teacher will help facilitate that at home, will help have directions, but the students remotely will also be taking the NWEA at the same time as in school.
Great. Question about tech for remote learners. So sorry, the chat is jumping around a little bit. So we will be asking parents on the survey if they need technology, and if you do, we'll be building a plan for you to pick up a device to use from the SAU. So at this point, we're not asking parents to purchase devices. Certainly if you have a device for your student to use at home, that will be okay, but we are going to provide those for the students who need them.
I think we're jumping around. So if there is enough space between desks, will children then be able to remove masks while they are at their desk? So what we said is in the classroom, they have their mask on. If it is a mask break and they are doing silent reading, what have you, as a 5-minute mask break, and separated and so physically distanced, yes, but it's more about mask breaks inside the classroom.
Great.
How are we working with parents, multiple twins, triplets on their classroom and pod assignments? I would say if there's, again, if there's something has changed from when you shared information earlier, but certainly reach out if you want your triplets on the same pod. Just reach out to us.
Mm-hmm. And we've gotten a lot of those requests through that parent survey form, which has been really helpful, and we'll be using that to guide our placement. So we've got a couple questions about the size of the pods and of smaller groups. And I think, Anna, I can start answering this, but please feel free to jump in. When we look at this, approach, we are looking at students who in the past, many of our students at Clark-Wilkins would leave classrooms to go to other spaces for supports and services and interventions and different activities. Our plan is that within the pod, everything can happen. So there aren't students transitioning too many times outside of that environment, and you're able to contain it a little bit more. We also feel that this is a nice instructional model, as you're going to have 3 teachers who can collaboratively plan and provide targeted instruction for students within that pod. As you saw, there is some movement within that, but it's not an all-day movement of 45 kids being reshuffled all of the time. It really is based on the small group time and the targeted needs of those students. So Anna, feel free to add to that.
Yeah, again, I think that what we're excited about instructionally with this is the meeting kids where they are, taking the data and providing the interventions and extensions for the students. So with those small group movement, again, I think the movement is mitigated and the numbers in the classroom are still small, and we're addressing their instructional needs.
And just to clarify, I have another question down here. A pod is a homeroom, which is a full-size classroom of approximately 10 to 15 students. And there are 3 full-size classrooms that are physically near each other with some shared door space that make up the other parts of the pod. So you have your homeroom with your anchoring adult of between 10 and 15 students. And then that's part of a pod that has other classrooms that are full size in space that could have between 30 and 45 students. It really depends on the numbers we get of students who elect for in-person instruction, and we have been moving furniture out of spaces to make sure we have plenty of rooms for kids to physically distance themselves. You may have seen that first grade video of Mrs. Boothroyd's classroom and the spaces that have been set up in there.
Her husband isn't happy about all the furniture that left her classroom and went home. But we still are moving furniture out of classrooms. So next question, do we know how the bus company is ensuring the drivers are being screened, not traveling outside of the safe states? So again, the bus company has their own strict protocols. We have been working with the bus company. Our business administrator works quite extensively with the bus company. They've been great with sharing their protocols, the numbers of students, working with us with bus runs. Somebody had asked earlier when you'll find out bus runs. They are also waiting for the exact same data of who's riding buses. Typically a 77 passenger bus will have 23 students max, every other seat 3 feet apart, and they are disinfected in the AM and then the PM, and then they switch seats. So each run, half would sit on the one side and they would switch the 3 feet apart. So.
We're getting some questions about the 10 days, Deanna. A student needs to stay home for 10 days. Will they access their schoolwork? Will they be designated as remote learners? So if a student's home for a longer period of time and they are quarantining, we would provide them access to that remote learning environment, which is why it's so important that our classroom teachers have time to collaborate as in-person instructors and remote teachers so that the transitions can be as seamless as possible for students as needed. And then we've got a question about, it's 10 days at home or negative COVID test, right? Not both. If we get results back after 2 days, they can come back on day 3. I'll ask you to answer that.
They can get if we send someone home, they have a COVID test, the test's negative, they can come back as soon as the test's negative. If they're not tested or they are positive, they need to stay home the 10 days. I just wanted to add one thing though. You might have heard of a 14-day quarantine. What that would be is like, let's say you're, someone was diagnosed with COVID-19. Anyone, their contacts around them that do not have symptoms yet would be quarantined for 14 days because they haven't had that incubation period to start symptoms. Where if you already have symptoms, you've obviously been through your incubation period, so it's 10 days from the time of symptoms starting. Does that clear that up a little bit? It's kind of confusing.
I think the first question too is kind of been up there. So if somebody is going home and they know that they have to be out for the 10 days, it kind of ticks our box of yes, we need to make sure they're switched into remote learning, that they're obtaining materials and a laptop. So the nurse and the front office, we will be working collaboratively to make that happen. So there's no loss of days.
Sure. So I'm trying to look.
Will bandanas, neck gaiters be allowed as masks? Studies have shown they are not as helpful with COVID-19.
I can respond to that one.
Sure.
So you're right. The studies are showing that they're not as effective, but some kind of a mask is better than nothing, is what the professionals are saying in public health. So we're not going to, if someone shows up with a gaiter, if they're going to wear that, that's better than them not wearing a mask. So we're not going to have them change.
Great. Questions on limits on outdoor activities at recess, less equipment, and no tag, no ball games, etc. Yeah. So we will be working with our PE teachers to promote games that allow for a little more physical distancing than games that do not. And we're being creative and finding ways to provide students that outlet that they need to be able to play outside and enjoy recess time, but, you know, playing games that are, you know, a little less physical than we may have in the past. Anna, would you add to that?
Yeah, we're just finding definitely different games, but yeah, trying to be creative.
So a person who has symptoms and goes remote, will that person be added to a remote pod? So will they, so if you end up going remote, you will join the remote classroom teacher. We will not have our in-person instruction teachers doing remote learning at the same time. So you'll be part of that remote learning teaching environment, just as if you transitioned in and out. You know, of course, if it's a short illness and it's, you know, maybe it's not COVID-19 or one of those, there could be some type of other scenario made, but I'd say for the most part, you're going to transition to that remote teacher. A question about to confirm in-person students get about 10-to-1 classroom size, remote learners will have 22-to-1 or thereabouts. So our remote learning environments, we're projecting our numbers right now, but until we get the data from parents on their choice, we are anticipating a typical classroom size for remote learning like it was in the spring, and in-person classroom sizes will be smaller in an effort to provide more physical distancing for students in the in-person environment.
So we go back up, can you speak more about mask breaks, frequency, duration, location? So we are looking for mask breaks at least every hour. Deanna, again, I think for frequency, the duration, 5 minutes, location can be, we have multi-purpose room, we have outside. Again, we talked about inside.
We talked about another thing is maybe having that be quiet reading time where the children are in the classroom are, you know, 6 feet apart and have their masks off for maybe 5 minutes during some quiet reading where they're not moving around the classroom is another option. But ideally, outside would be the best break time if we can.
Question about students bringing their own supplies. What's the best way to store them? So Anna mentioned we're trying to be creative. We had one of our paraprofessionals shared a great idea of, you know, buckets, like almost like the big paint buckets that have lids on them that students could bring between our in-school environments and outdoor classroom environments where they could store their own supplies. So we would be using some of those techniques, working with teachers now to brainstorm what's going to make the most sense in the spaces in the classroom, and then working with PTA and community members on donations to provide us those materials. So more to come on what it will look like exactly based on the grade level that your child is in and that teaching environment, but we are going to provide individual spaces for student use.
Okay. I think we're growing in questions.
We are, so let's just kind of, we have, I know we have an end time, so we'll just keep going and we'll do our best to try to answer all of them though.
Let's go down. I'm going to go down a little bit. Will
Sure.
twins be asked to be on the same class together? I don't mind. They don't have to be on the same pod. That's twins and triplets. Typically a parent choice on that, whether you want them together, same homeroom, same pod. If you can just let us know on that.
Yep. So I'm going to go down a little bit too. I've got a couple more questions about K and the pods. So I want to bring up another point with the pods that we haven't described yet. So, you know, obviously, why not just limit to that small group? It's our goal that we are creating those heterogeneously balanced classrooms where students can get the services they need, and having a teacher on that pod who is a certified special educator allows those students to receive those service. Our goal is not that they're mixing all day, all the time. It really would be for those targeted instructional blocks if needed. And also, one of the things that our superintendent talked a lot about in the beginning of the year with at the beginning of this process with the task force work is that importance of redundancy. And the pod model allows us to provide redundancy for our teachers that in the event that one of them was sick or perhaps a non-COVID related reason or was not in the classroom that day, the other teachers in that environment would be able to help support those learners in continuing along that learning progression. And we could utilize perhaps our support staff rather than bringing in a substitute who hasn't been a part of that pod before. So there is some potential there that will help protect the safety of our staff and substitutes and the students within that pod structure.
All right, so okay, you already answered that. The thing keeps moving. I know this was just asked, but there's some confusion on, is there a flex day on Wednesday? My understanding is that children will be in school Monday through Friday with no days off during the week. So there is no flex day. Wednesday is time for small group. A lot of the teachers have really asked for that one-on-one time with students, that social emotional connection and team building. So it's not a flex day, but it's an opportunity for small group work.
But Anna, I think you want to clarify too, there's students are in the building 5 days a week, right?
Sorry. Yes.
Right. Choose in person. There is no at-home day during the week.
5 days a week.
So I'm going to go back up to the top here. What about the children who have the inability to be quiet? And we will work with those students. And certainly, like we said, we are going to meet all of our students where they're at. We're going to encourage that safe practices within the learning environment. And we will make sure that we're able to help all students be successful here at Clark-Wilkins with some of our new realities.
Oh my gosh, it bounces when we start to read. When will the next survey be going out and student registration? Next survey is going out tomorrow, and that's really, Adam is looking for final answers for first segment, but just remember every segment you're going to be asked what your choice is 2 weeks before the segment starts. There was a question on here about 4th grade and how we choose.
Oh, I can see it down there. What factors are teachers considering when choosing kids for the pods? I'm thinking about 4th grade girls who attend in person.
Yeah. So I would say, do you want to go?
No, go for it, Anna.
I mean, there's a lot of variables that go into consideration when we're doing teams. And last year, I think there was a great job done, and that's why we were looking to move small groups up. So it is boys, girls, it's data that we have, it's mixtures, it's their needs, I think having a blending of needs for the teachers, and other things that I missed on that.
No, I think, we do our very best with class placement, and this year we're kind of thankful we didn't do class placement earlier because we're in the situation now where we really are going to be creative, but certainly we're taking into consideration all of that feedback that teachers have provided us and all of our families. So parents filled out surveys for us in the spring. It was the most we've gotten in a while for Clark-Wilkins parents, and we so appreciate that because that's just really helpful information for us. And then we'll be working really hard on that, probably this weekend when we get that data in later this week on the choices for the segment. I see a question about if more people select in school than expected, is there a point where you will reconsider classes and pods? And yes, the answer is yes for that. Right now we're going off of the data we have based on the last parent survey, but we will certainly reconsider. We want to provide the safest in-person school model possible. We will need to be flexible. If there's a need for another pod at a grade level, we will figure that out. And you may have seen the maps and it could be a little tight, but we are ready to get creative and be flexible.
So I think we're down to just four more to go.
So
What about lunches? Will any food be provided or all bring from home? We will have lunches that will be served. We're actually meeting with the food director tomorrow, but there will be lunches available. We will have staff members bring the lunches to the classrooms every day, but lunches will be, you can still order those from the lunchroom.
So a question about red status or orange, would remote teacher be expected to teach the entire grade, or would the in-person homeroom teacher teach remote? So if we're all remote, then those in-person teachers will become remote teachers. And if we're in that orange status where we're only allowed to have a small percentage of students in the building, on the other days, the in-person teacher will be teaching that remote environment to you. All of our teachers are going to get trained in professional developments before the start of the school year in the event we need to pivot and go remote. It's just at the beginning and the onset of our plan, we are not going to have those in-person teachers simultaneously have remote learners while also meeting the needs of those in-person students.
So will Clark be assessed independently of Wilkins if there's an outbreak and goes full remote? Again, that would be a question for the superintendent, but I would make the assumption that it is a Clark-Wilkins decision. But again, I would leave that to him to make that decision. And 2 more to go.
Yep, a
They
few more. We're
accidentally
getting.
grew.
So I'm
We're
seeing
at 142 questions answered.
Yeah, so Map about portables, 4th grade classrooms, different pods. That's a really great question and one that we've discussed too. So the portable classrooms will not be using that shared entrance. They will be using the exterior entrances to the classroom. So there won't be that cross-contamination. And we are also working with those classroom teachers on bathroom plans for those students, so there won't be that those students are sharing that bathroom in that same portable too.
I just,
So
Kristen, do you want to
yeah,
maybe either read that or reach out to the parent?
Yep, there's a question about the potential need for an IEP for a student.
Yep.
We can certainly, is that Anne-Marie, you can reach out to me and we can look at scheduling a disposition or referral meeting to talk about what the concerns are and come up with a plan.
I did answer that one as well in the Q&A.
Okay.
I
Thank
think
you, Meg.
to it, but I just want families to know that all of our referral team meetings, IEP team meetings, progress update meetings, all of those meetings will take place in a timely manner. We will be having all of our meetings in a remote fashion, but you know, our hope is to resume all of our supports and services, including in-person assessments with the children once we get back in early September.
so
Right. Last question.
yep, so I'm seeing a question about foregoing public school and choosing to homeschool, what supports will be offered. So, you know, we will comply with the New Hampshire state laws regarding homeschooling, providing student materials for those parents who request them. And you would be able to access our curriculum materials via the SAU 39 website. You would need to file an intent to homeschool with the school district. So you would need to notify us if that is your plan and your choice to do that.
So we want to thank everybody again for joining us tonight, for hopefully having us answer your questions to be able to make a better informed decision when the survey comes out tomorrow. If there are any questions, please reach out to us and please ask them, and we will continue to work on more videos. We'll continue to update any of our logistics document. There were some questions about buses and pickup that we'll take a look at, but we appreciate it. And again, we miss you guys. We miss your kids. Hopefully they're at the computer or you know, there to see us, but please let them know we miss them, and we'll see everybody soon. Thanks.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.